Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Taproom Success Show. I'm Andrew Copeland, and I'm joined by my buddy, Carrie Shumway. Carrie, is it feeling like spring in New Hampshire?
It's feeling like spring. We've got green grass and the trees are budding out, so I'm a happy camper. I love it.
And it feels like spring to me too, because you and I both got back from the recent Craft Brewers Conference, and that's going to somewhat inspire a couple conversations that we'll have on here coming up. And the weather in Virginia is great down here, but I think spring is also a time to, spring cleaning, of course, but look at your business and what systems you can improve on. And today, I know you're really excited to talk about Brewery Financial Operating Systems. You love systems, I love systems and routines, and you've been working on a financial system for breweries. So tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, I would love to. So at CBC in Philly, number one, I thought it was the best that I've been to maybe ever, and certainly in a long, long time. Just,
Okay, pause there. Why was it so good? You can't just say best ever without any real explanation.
honestly, it was the whole shebang, right? I thought the location was awesome. Most of the tap rooms were walkable. You got us a great Airbnb that was right across the street, so that was
That
extremely
was clutch location, I will
it was
say.
a clutch location. Had a lot of great conversations and meetings with folks, and then was fortunate enough to do a couple of presentations, which were really well received as well. So it was kind of just the whole deal. And I thought the vibe of the place was good. And I find CBC's generally a lot of fun anyway. Sort of this combination of like, oh, so much fun, but also so exhausting. And it certainly was. It was quite tiring, but yeah, for all those reasons, I thought it was pretty awesome. How about you?
I did enjoy CBC. I think the keynote, which we'll dive into later, Will Guidara's Unreasonable Hospitality inspired keynote, he was there. Great to learn from him. I think it really set the tone. Hospitality hadn't been a word we'd used a lot in the beer space, and now I think we're finally latching onto it. So that was a really positive kickoff to CBC, and it really set the vibe of conversations, looking forward versus complaining and, just commiserating together. And I think that kind of made for a more positive CBC.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's interesting too, because maybe this is a little self-serving, but it did seem like there was a lot of focus on hospitality, but also on the business of the business, right? So the the presentations that I had done were effectively on this concept of a financial operating system, as you had mentioned. And it's really like, how do you like focus on your most important numbers in your business? Because we all say we want to do that. And then how do we install a system so we get a simple, repeatable routine that gives us a predictable result? And I often make the analogy like, you wouldn't brew beer without all of these systems, checklists and timing. Everything has to be like very structured or the beer is going to be a mess. You want a predictable result, and your financials the same way. So this financial operating system that I presented on, and we're going to talk a little bit about today, is really just a structured way to get good, predictable, consistent numbers so that you can see what's going on in your business. And that's fundamentally one of the biggest problems when we're running a tap room, running a brewery is we don't have real great visibility. We don't have really great real-time numbers. A lot of this old information, it's kind of too late to do anything about it. So this kind of twists it around so that you can train your staff. We can put these systems in place so you get those good numbers.
Okay, let's talk about more about that financial training piece. We all want to train our staff better on so many different areas, but how do you actually implement a financial training program?
Yeah, it's so true. And I found this from my own experiences. Unfortunately, a lot of times when we're running our business, we want our department managers to take accountability. And that makes perfect sense. You're getting paid, you're showing up, we want you to do certain things, watch certain numbers, but we don't necessarily spend enough time training them on what the numbers mean and how they connect to them and where they're supposed to find the information and how they can even affect these numbers. So the first step of the financial operating system is to install financial literacy training and for non-financial people, because that's most people. So how do I, understand these numbers? What should I be looking at? So we start just by sending out a quick survey, talking to our people, like, what do you want to learn more about? What numbers are you tracking now? What's your comfort level with, reading an income statement, for example, so that you can kind of assess where are they, and then using that, we can assemble a financial training curriculum. And in our Taproom Success educational content, we have these courses. So you do the initial meet people where they are, create the curriculum. And then everybody gets kind of a base level understanding. And this financial literacy training, like any training, is continuous and ongoing. So it's not like one and done. But that's typically how we started off is, giving people a good understanding of what are the most important numbers that they should be watching and how can they affect those numbers.
Okay, let's keep diving deeper and deeper into these numbers. That's why we're here. That's why everybody's listening. Daily and weekly metrics and tracking, it sounds so important. We're all busy. So, what kind of numbers should managers and staff actually be tracking?
Yeah. So the first step is financial literacy training, right? Getting everybody a base level understanding. The second step is creating what we would call a budget, right? You have to have a financial plan. Now, some breweries have them, some breweries don't. They've started it, it worked, it didn't. Most of the breweries that I work with, they don't have a financial plan. And there's lots of reasons, like it takes forever, or it's obsolete once I'm done, or we never do anything with it. But we've got to have those financial targets so that, and we often say, like, you need one financial goal. Like, what is your one North Star around which you can organize all of your department managers? So that financial plan really sets the stage for these daily and weekly metrics. Because we've all seen budgets and it's like, well, yeah, it's good to have these targets, but what do I do every day? What decisions, actions should I make that are aligned with? That's where the daily and weekly metrics come in. So if you're a tapper manager, we suggest or taproom manager, head brewers, sales manager, whatever your departments, whoever is on your financial leadership team should have 3 to 5 key metrics that align with your primary financial target, which is coming from your budget. So, simple example, if we say, hey, I want a bottom line profit of 10%, that's our primary financial target. Now I want to create key metrics that are aligned with. So my taproom manager can focus on their 3 to 5 key metrics that are aligned with that 10% profit goal. So, for example, we might track the usual three that we talk about as, number of customers, average ring or guest check, and revenue per barrel. And we need some historical data, and then we want to improve each of those by a certain amount so that it's tied to. And in simplistic terms, if we want to increase our profitability by, say 20%, then we might look to each of those metrics to try to increase those by some percentage. But we start with historically, where have we been? Set targets based on those primary financial goals. So I think that's really steps kind of 2 and 3, the budget, and then these daily metrics that are aligned with that primary goal.
Carrie, something else you always talk about is like weekly financial meetings, just bringing everybody together to talk about the numbers. So we talked about it even before we got on this call. Oh, geez, we have so many calls today, so many meetings. It's tough when you're always in meetings. But with that said, how can busy taproom managers make time for yet another one? Because these are so important to understand the big picture in the business.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is just prioritization. I mean, you have to, it has to be important. And it's funny because, I've been doing this a long time and, 10 years ago, quite frankly, it wasn't that important for tap rooms because they're doing fine. I mean, there's plenty of cash, plenty of customers, people buy, we make our beer, we sell out. Everything's fine. We didn't really need to, or at least it was perceived at that time, didn't really need to make this a priority, this financial focus. And all that's changed now. Now it's about at the top of the list. But I think what folks are struggling with is they don't really know where to start. They're like, I know I have a cash flow problem. I know, sales are flat to declining. I'm just working harder. They put their head down and work harder. So the concept of these weekly financial meetings or financial huddles is to create time and space for an exclusive focus on the most important numbers of your business. How are you doing relative to your targets? What gaps are you seeing? And then what are you going to do to close those gaps? And not like once in a while or when we get to it or when we have time, but every week at a specified day and time. So back when TV shows were like at a specified day and time, we'd say, hey, Thursday at 8 o'clock, you're watching this show. That's when it comes on.
I will
That
say I don't miss being that structured.
Well, that's probably true. We can flip on the Netflix. And I suppose there's room here in your financial huddles to have some fluidity, but it concerns me because if it's too fluid, you're just not going to do it. There's a saying like we are what we focus on. We are what we focus on. And if we want to improve our numbers, we really do need to set time and space for those. So the meetings themselves are designed to be efficient and outcome focused. And there's a preparation. So if we want accountability, we first start by training, and then we have these weekly financial meetings whereby our managers come in and report on what were their 3 to 5 key metrics, what were their targets, what were the actuals, where do we see variances, and then what are you going to do to close those variances? Not sometime, but this coming week. So we're really shifting the focus on traditional financials of how did we do last month. We want to shift it to like, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do this week? What are our goals? And then we meet again next week to see how we did on those. So you get communication, you get accountability, and you get that laser focus on your most important numbers. So yes, it takes time, but I think tone at the top is a thing too. Like ownership's got to say, we need to focus on this. We got some problems. And the other thing I guess I would say is most breweries are small businesses, and a lot of this financial burden falls to the owners because they're like, it's my business, it's my response. And it is. However, you've got a team of people that if they know, they want to help. They're there to make a difference. So these financial huddles are a really way to kind of shine a light on how are we doing as a business and how am I doing as a taproom manager and what can I do differently? Because we all want to improve, but sometimes we just don't know how. So this is a way to share that communication. Here's how our business is doing. Here are the things the levers that you can pull that are going to help us succeed, not just in great customer service, but as a business.
Okay. So we want everybody to be more successful. We're all so busy. So give us one thing that everyone listening needs to do right now to begin installing the financial operating system like we spoke of today.
Yeah, I would start just by identifying who might be on your financial leadership team. And that might just be, if you're an owner with just kind of one partner, maybe it's just a two-person team. You might have a team of a dozen. But I would say like start with kind of your departments. And typically we'd have, tap room sort of front of house. Maybe you've got, head brewer in the back of house. Maybe you've got a salesperson. Identify who your financial leadership team is, and then get an assessment like what is their comfort level now with the financials. Some people would surprise you, and I've been surprised in the past when people are like, oh yeah, I track, all these numbers, and they're doing it anyway. Others, no, they don't have any idea. But start with who's your team, do an assessment of where they're at, and then get them some training so that you can move forward, in alignment as a company on how we're going to improve these numbers. And again, we've got those resources at Taproom Success. There's other, obviously you can just kind of go online and figure this out, but it's all organized there if people want to check that out.
Awesome. Well, Carrie, it's been great recapping on all the numbers. I know you dream of them. And everybody, we'd love to continue the conversation in Taproom Success. We've got all the resources, as Carrie mentioned earlier, but it's so important to come together with others like yourselves. And I say it a lot, but I love the masterminds that we do when taproom managers and owners come together from across the country to share what's working, what's not working. Just get inspired. That's so important right now. And speaking of scheduling these meetings, this is a meeting you can always put on your calendar and get excited about. Nothing against your numbers, Carrie, but connecting with peers is always maybe a little more fun for most. And we, of course, can talk about numbers as well. But you can learn more at taproomsuccess.com. These masterminds are every third Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, hopefully forever. So you can put them on your calendar and always be there. Everybody, we hope to see you soon. And cheers.